Good evening and welcome to this special public lecture as a part of our Senior Executives course. It is a privilege and honor to introduce someone who is much more than the sum of the list of achievements in his CV. Not that these achievements are in any way minimal. Justice Dr. N. Santosh Hegde joined the bar in 1966. He has been an Advocate General of Karnataka, Additional Solicitor General to the Government of India, and Solicitor General to the Government of India. When Justice Hegde was appointed as Judge of the Supreme Court of India in 1999, he held the rare distinction of being one among only 4 persons in the history of the Supreme Court to be elevated as Judge directly from the bar. After his retirement from the Supreme Court in June 2005, he was chairperson of the Telecom Dispute Settlement Appellate Tribunal from June 2005 to August 2006. Later, under his leadership, the Lokayukta cleared over 12,000 complaints filed by citizens against public servants for offences of corruption and maladministration. Beyond these bald facts, Justice Hegde represents a larger tradition of the judiciary leading the fight on moral issues. If I may say so, this is a tradition that he may in fact have inherited from his father. It runs in the family. His father, Justice K.S. Hegde, played an important role in the events leading up to the fight against the emergency. In the same tradition, Justice Santosh Hegde, as we all know, has played a pivotal role in the effort to come up with a new Lokpal bill. Today, he will move beyond the legal framework to address the larger issue of the fall in moral values and the consequences thereof. It's an honor and privilege to welcome Justice Dr. N. Santosh Hegde to give us his lecture.
A very good evening to you all. At the outset, I'm sorry, I'm a little late. I've been inside the campus for 20 minutes. I got an opportunity of seeing the entire Tata Institute campus. That's one thing. The second thing is I was introduced as Dr. Hegde. I'm not a doctor. Of course, I have a couple of honorary degrees, but then there's a judgment of the Supreme Court of 1996 which says it's only academic doctors can put doctor as a prefix to their name, and people who get very easily university honorary doctors cannot use it as doctors. They can use it after the name as an award. They can't use it as a prefix. Well, gentlemen, I don't think I have addressed a gathering as eminent and better known than me as this gathering, but I'm really, really glad to be with you all this evening. I very often feel that until I came to the institution of Karnataka Lokayukta, I was a frog in the well. I really did not know the sufferings of the people in the ground level. I was comfortable and happy. I thought the entire world was comfortable and happy. But when I worked in the Lokayukta institution, the experience was entirely different. I saw the sufferings of the people, that too because of inaction and malaction on the part of the officers representing an institution created under the Constitution of India called the government. I'm not a politician. I don't intend becoming one. I have dealt with the politicians in different ways. I'm here now to place before you what exactly governance can do to a state. My experience is confined only to the state of Karnataka. And I'm very happy that I got this opportunity to speak to some people. You might not have also experienced what I have experienced in the institution of Lokayukta. The topic, fall in moral values and the consequences thereof, is the only thing I talk these days. I have forgotten law. I was thinking, what shall I do after retiring? God had given me many an opportunity of holding many posts. But then before I could take a decision, I got an opportunity because Mr. Anna Hazare started a fight against corruption. And the institution of Karnataka Lokayukta, one of the job is to fight against corruption. But there is another part of the jurisdiction called the grievance redressal. That jurisdiction allows the Karnataka Lokayukta to respond to the problems of the people, which they bring it to the notice of the institution, and try to solve the problem. If that jurisdiction were not to be there, the Karnataka Lokayukta, the only other remedy was to file a suit or file a writ petition, which in the present day context is an extremely costly and a delayed process. In 25 years of my tenure, I got 26,000 plus complaints, which we did inquire into, and a large percentage of people got relief from that. The various types of problems which I'll be placing before you, which I dealt with, it was really heart-rending that people who are appointed under the Constitution to serve the people of this country, how they behave, especially with the have-nots, and the sufferings of those who have failed to get relief from the public servants. The entire attitude of the public servants seems to have changed. As an youngster, I had seen the elected representatives of the people, so also the people who are appointed to serve in the government. But I don't think I ever had an experience which I have now have. I, in my experience, have come to the conclusion we, as people, losing one of the most important characters of our life. That's contentment, satisfaction in life. What we call in vernacular as trupti, without which a person can never ever be happy. I've seen the consequences of not having this human character. To just bring it to your notice at this stage, what's the quantum of corruption, the value in corruption is, I would like to place before you. In 50s, we had one corruption called the Jeep scam. The amount that was lost to the country was 52 lakhs. That's in purchasing Jeep vehicles for the Indian Army. We had many other scams thereafter. Dalmia scam of Bharat Bank, Mundra scam of LIC, Nagarwala scam of Central Bank. Like that, the scams one after the other started coming into the public domain. It's not all scams come into the public domain. Maybe 10-15% of them come. In 1986, we had a major scam, the Bofors. The amount lost to this country was 64 crores of rupees. We had two scams which came into the public domain. The Asian Games, Commonwealth Games, the amount lost is 70,000 crores. The same year, the CAG reported another scam called 2G, Spectrum scam. Amount lost was 1,76,000 crores of rupees. 2012, we had another scam, Colgate. Amount lost was 1,86,000 crores. Ladies and gentlemen, just imagine if this money was available for developmental work, how much would really this country would have developed. To give one example, State of Karnataka's budget for the year 2011-2012 for 6.5 crores of people for 365 days was only 1,32,000 crores. In Colgate, the country lost 1,86,000 crores. Taken over, eaten away by about 25 to 30 people. In Colgate, the country lost 1.76 lakhs, taken away maybe by 5 to 10 people only. Imagine the greed. Just see the growth of zeros in these figures, from 52 lakhs to 1,86,000 crores. When you experience the consequences of lack of contentment in life, you see the problems like the one I'm going to explain now. In 2008, a handicapped tailor with a 6-month-old child and his wife came to my office, kept the child in the floor of the office and folded their hands and said, "Please, sir, look after this child, we're going to run away." I said, "Lift the child, the chair's in front of the table, sit down and tell me what's your problem." They told me, "This child is otherwise all right, but for the fact the rectum was not open." Not a great medical thing, but for the child, it would eat in the mouth and defecate through the mouth. The couple were advised by a general practitioner to take the child to a super speciality hospital. So they took the child to a government medical college hospital. The pediatric surgeon there examined the child and he said, yes, he will rectify the shortcomings, but it will cost this much money. Money is not money, money is bribe. The couple gave all the money they had. I'm not dramatizing, everything is recorded, it is there in the office of the Lokayukta even today. Seeing it, the amount, he says, for this money, I'll make a hole near the rib cage so that the fecal matters can keep going out. Not being satisfied, he brought the child to my office. Now this part of the narration is only to complete the narration. I could have sent the child to any government hospital with a recommendation letter, but I didn't have the confidence. So I gave a letter to some super speciality hospitals in Bangalore, mentioning that as a Lokayukta, I'm begging to give this child a future. We have no money to give. All the hospitals agreed. I'm not espousing the cause of the private hospitals. I know they are as bad when it comes to money as anybody else. One hospital in the old airport road, the Manipal hospital, they said, we'll do it tomorrow, send the child. We sent the child there. They did the operation and the child was there for 1 month. Today that child is like me and like anybody else. Ladies and gentlemen, just think within yourselves and answer yourselves. Is this doctor a human being? What has greed done to him? He was lucky enough to have enough experience, get a medical degree, he did his post-graduation, that too in pediatric surgery, and comes and joins a government hospital, which is the only recourse for poor people for their health problems. He sees a 6-month-old child. He has the necessary knowledge and capacity to give relief to that child. But that greed in him did not allow him to treat this child. See what greed does. I'll give you another example, slightly different. In 2011, an air marshal rings me up from Hyderabad. I never knew him, he never knew me. He says, Mr. Hegde, 3 days back, my brother's 18-year-old daughter is killed in Bangalore in a road accident. The body is lying in one of the government hospitals. The doctor assigned to do the post-mortem is not doing the post-mortem. We have kept an ambulance outside the hospital for 3 days. Please help us try and understand the grief of my family. I went to the hospital, met the superintendent of the hospital. He said, I did not know anything about it. I have deputed Mr. So-and-so or Dr. So-and-so to do the operation. He summoned the doctor. Just see his attitude. He says, what's the hurry? Body in a cold storage. Nothing has happened to the body. I'll do it when I get time. Does this doctor understand the sorrow, the grief of the parents and the family? A member of the family has died 3 days back. They have to wait for 3 days to see the dead body and do the last rites, perform the last rites. What sort of a doctor is he? Maybe for him death is nothing. He sees death every day in and out, possibly. But for the family, does he see their problem? And we call ourselves as human beings, a superior species than other animals. Are these two doctors human beings? I don't believe that we are born human beings anymore. I'm strengthened by an article I read about a person wrote it, where he says, among other things, become what you want to become in life, but become a human being first. I believe in that. We are not born human beings. But in the journey of life, if we acquire humanism and exhibit it, then when you die, most probably you die as a human being. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of such instances where I can't believe that we can call ourselves as human beings. Outside my institution, I'll give you 2 instances which some of you might have watched. 3 years back, I saw a video in the television of a family of father, mother and 2 children traveling in a scooter in Jaipur. Was knocked down by a lorry and the lorry goes away. Mother is dead, 1 child is dead. The father is injured, another child is injured. They're begging to help them, to take them to the hospital. Not a single soul helped them. For 30-35 minutes, the person who's videographing, he doesn't go there and show it either. He is happy with videographing the scene. Then a police van comes and helps them to go to the hospital. Yes, reasons are many. We are afraid. If you go to tell them or take them to the hospital, the police will foist a case against us. But that's not the attitude of a human being. Then about 3 months back in Meerut, a husband and wife traveling in a scooter and 5 youngsters traveling in a car. If something happens between them, they get down and hammer the husband. Wife goes to stop, they hammer her. A policeman is watching. Another videographer is watching. And a group of 50-60 people are watching. Nobody went to the help of the couple. Why do we call ourselves human beings? Now let me give you some more of loss of values in this society. Today, I think we live in a society which respects wealth and power only. It has no respect for honesty and no respect for an honest officer. Very often I hear, a useless chap, I say, he doesn't take money, he doesn't allow others to take money. Nothing he will help nobody. This is the attitude the society has. And see the consequences of loss of values. I've seen governance from when I was 10 years old or 12 years old, it was never the same. Just to show the fall in values of all the three pillars of the Constitution, I will point out certain things. When our elders were drafting the Constitution for this country, the issue that came up for consideration was what type of a political system that this country should have. The people in the Constituent Assembly were mostly people who fought for the freedom of this country. So they spoke with emotion. They said, we Indians were never, ever independent. We were under the rules of Rajas, the Maharajas, the foreigners. They made the laws they wanted, and we had to perforce follow the law. If we didn't, then we were punished. So they pleaded that let's adopt a political system by which every Indian feels this country is mine, this governance is mine, this administration is mine. Internationally, there were many, many political systems. There was monarchy, there was dictatorship, there reason-based politics. There was also a system called democracy. Meaning of that system then was government of the people, by the people, for the people. I don't think that definition holds good today. I very often feel it seems to be a government of some, by some, for some. How does the Constitution, the legislature function, which is the first pillar of the Constitution of India? For 4 years, the Constituent Assembly started. That was the predecessor of the present Parliament. Never, ever any member walked out to the Assembly. Nobody contradicted except by way of reply. Nobody interrupted a speaker while speaking. It was so till about 60-65 in the present Parliament, be it the Lok Sabha or the Raj Sabha. It isn't the same now. Take the latest sittings of the Raj Sabha. His Excellency the President today has said, allow the Raj Sabha to function. Do not show your strength and stop the government from administering the country. President of the country is saying about the functioning of the Raj Sabha. What happened in the Lok Sabha, the last 3 sessions? They passed the Lokpal bill in 1 hour. Only the law minister spoke, nobody else spoke. The bill was passed. They passed the Andhra Telangana separation bill. There was total galata going on in the house. A member even sprayed pepper spray. The Honorable Speaker said the bill is passed. The last of the bill, to replace the collegium with the commission. As per the newspaper report, many of the members didn't even have the copy of the bill, leave alone studying the bill. The bill was passed. This is not what the Constituent Assembly members contemplated when they created the 2 houses of the Parliament. If you read the Constitution and the responsibilities of the members of the Parliament, they are expected to study the bill, see the consequences of this bill on their constituents in the Assembly, constituent, and discuss the bill, if not oppose. Doesn't happen. In 2010, a magazine called Election Watch did an audit performance of the members of the Lok Sabha from 2004 to 2009. Out of 542 members of the Lok Sabha, the people who spoke at least once in the 5 years tenure was only 174. Why do we elect them and send them to the parliament? Fabulous salary they get. All benefits, perks, everything is there. I'm not grudging what they get, but then I'm only grudging what they do. Except participating in parliamentary proceedings, everything else outside the house they indulge in. This is our parliament. Let's take the other pillar, the executive, the bureaucrats. Every scam that has come into the public domain, there is at least one bureaucrat or executive involved in it, without which no scam can take place. When the executive was being created under the Constitution, the members of the Constituent Assembly spoke and they said, don't ever allow politicians to interfere with the executive. Don't give the politicians the power to appoint them or to dismiss them. They are given a constitutional guarantee of tenure, Article 307 to 311. But what are they doing? Why are they succumbing to the pressure of the politicians? Is it the greed in them? They can't have fear. At the most, they can be transferred. Nothing else can be done. Come to the judiciary, which I served for 42 years. What's happening in the judiciary? In every case, in the first court today, takes nothing less than 15 to 20 years. Then there's an appeal. Then there's an appeal to the Supreme Court. And some people thrive out of that delay. Take the case of Lalu Yadav. 16 years in the first court. He's got a stay. The matter is pending in the High Court. Take the former Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu. 18 years. And that case was transferred by the Supreme Court in 2002 from Tamil Nadu to Karnataka on an allegation that no witness is being allowed to come to the court. And the direction was this case should be carried on a day-to-day basis and completed. 2002 to 2013. Or 14, sorry. If they do not have enough hands, then ask the government to create hands. You may ask me a question, what were you doing there? Yeah, I was guilty of it, but I realized the consequences of it only when I came out. I was watching a debate just before the 2014 parliamentary elections. A political party leader was being quizzed by the anchor person. He said, you speak about honesty in your political party, but you are given a seat to a central minister who had to resign because of charges of corruption. The answer was Farafat. No charge sheet has been filed against him. Okay. But then you have asked a chief minister of a state to resign on the charges of corruption. And charge sheet has been filed. But he's not yet been convicted. But then you are taking the support of a politician against whom charge sheet is filed. Conviction is there. But then he has obtained a stay. I mean, I'm trying to project how easily we take this thing. Corruption charges has got no moral turpitude anymore. A politician was in power, was found guilty of misconduct in mining in Karnataka. He goes to jail. People go behind him crying. He gets a bail, he comes out. People go with band and crackers and sweets being distributed. And somebody was sarcastically telling me, what's wrong in going to jail? Even Mahatma Gandhi went to jail. And he stands for election, he wins with 3 lakhs plus votes. Is this the society in which we all lived earlier? No. I have been addressing youth and college students. I've been to more than 750 educational institutions to talk to the students, interact with them, explain to them my views of what's happening in the society, pleading with them to change the society in which we are. I know it's not going to come during my lifetime, but doesn't matter. I believe in the Chinese proverb which says, even the journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. I'm satisfied with what I'm doing. If anybody calls me and if I have the time, I go and express the same thing. I have nothing different to say because I believe truth has only one color, it doesn't have multiple colors. And I speak only about the fall in moral values, which I have seen in plenty. Ladies and gentlemen, one of my colleagues in the Supreme Court once telephoned to me. I believe he saw a TV clipping in which he saw me sitting in Freedom Park in protest. He told me, Santosh, what are you doing? You, a former judge of the Supreme Court, sitting in a Maidan protesting? I can't think of it. I had to tell him, if you were to work in an institution like Lokayukta, you also would have participated in this protest. We judges, as very well said, live in ivory towers. As I mentioned earlier, we think if we are happy, the world is happy. But that's not what it in the reality is. There is a fourth estate which is the fourth pillar of the Constitution, which is not recognized by the Constitution, but by out of their hard work and people's liking, it was identified as the fourth pillar of the Constitution, the media. What's happened to that media? You all must have read an article in Outlook magazine about 2 years back. The paid news concept. Meera Radia, the lady. What does it indicate? In every walk of life, there are no values. The values which my parents taught, the do's and don'ts in life. During my school days, I had 2 subjects, moral science and civics. Moral science taught me what my parents taught, but in a slightly religious way. Civics taught me my right vis-a-vis the right of others. We don't have moral science anymore. During my visit to one of the educational institutions, I asked the principal, why don't you have moral science and civics as a subject? No. We are now teaching the students value-based education. What is that value-based education? How to make money quickly. Nothing beyond that. You have to bring about a lot of changes in the attitude of the parents in bringing up their children, the educational system, and most of all build a society which boycotts the corrupt. This lack of values being taught by the parents, see the consequences. In 2013, in Delhi, you had the Nirbhayas incident. Today, you take every page of a newspaper, there will be one or two atrocities against the women. Every day. And according to me, it's only because these boys have not been taught how to deal with women. Just see the fall in moral values in every aspect of life. Be it making money, be it treating others. When I go to education institutions and I speak about contentment in life, I also say, I'm not saying that after you achieve something, relax, be content, don't do anything more. No. Everybody must have an ambition. Ambition to grow, ambition to become somebody big, ambition even to become rich. Legitimately earned wealth is no product of sin. Earn, enjoy, provided it's legitimate, not by grabbing from the pocket of somebody, not by grabbing the things which are due to others. It's in this basis, I think, if we build a society, we will, our next generation will be happy, and it is their duty to build it because it is for their children's future also. Otherwise, anarchy is going to come. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm prepared to take questions from you if you have any.
Sir, thank you very much for your wonderful lecture. We have high regards for you. Just I wanted to know what happened to those two doctors. Were they punished or not?
Department inquiries were initiated so far as the first doctor is concerned, the pediatrician. But I have not followed it up because it is continuing like any other court case. Even departmental inquiries go on. I have not read anything about that, nor have I found out. But so far as the postmortem doctor is concerned, he was warned and left.
Sir, do you think a socialistic society is a less corrupt society than a capitalistic society? Because I ask this because when a free market economy is introduced, there is freedom for everybody to go as high as possible, and in that race, it's bound to happen that, because in a race you don't always think of going in the right track. If you just somehow win the prize, you get to the top echelons of society. Whereas a socialistic modern society where government sort of distributes the wealth and sees that nobody suffers. And, what I'm saying is the structure of the society...
I understand, sir. I do understand. The latest grading by the Transparency International shows that China is more corrupt than India. I read recently a news item that 2,000 people have been executed in the last year alone in China, where punishment for corruption is a death sentence. Therefore, I don't think any ism matters at all when it comes to greed. Greed is universal. It has no ism, according to me. Of course, in a free market society, the opportunity is much more, but then I think comparatively lesser people indulge in it because the moral values are adhered to more maybe in a country like India, in spite of all the fall.
Sir,
yeah.
Maybe I agree with you, but is it lack of good models or ideals which when we were students we got somebody who will be a role model for being honesty and simplicity? Now, even if Mahatma Gandhi is alive or Kamaraj is alive, many may have a different opinion, they can't have this much of support. Because the way the people, we don't follow what we practice, what we say. And second is the deterrent punishment takes a lot of time. And somehow what will happen, now we have justified. You see, there are a lot of saying, if a person takes some money and obliges you, it is not corruption. If a person takes some money and he doesn't oblige you, that is taken a different line. We have come to a level where we justify these kind of things.
That's exactly my problem, because when the society or the members of the society start justifying corruption merely because they got their work done faster by bribing, that's not the right thing to do at all. Because under the Indian Prevention of Corruption Act, bribe giver is also a person to be punished and all, so also the bribe receiver. And the latest thing that's going on today, a leader of the one political party in Delhi supposed to have said, take money from that party, take money from this party, but give me the vote and all. It's become a big controversy because abetment to bribing is also an offense. Therefore, I think it's not the lack of leaders either. It is just that even if you have good leaders, the question of making money is more important than anything else. Take, for example, you take the atrocities on women. There's no question of leader or others in the thing. It's pure lack of coaching, understanding. See, 2013, are there enough people understanding Kannada here? Okay, in 2013, on the eve of International Women's Year, a person wrote a song in Kannada here. I'll say it in Kannada, I'll translate it into English. Innadaru badalagu. Innadaru badalagu mundadaru manavanagu chiguralle chutadiru. At least change now. Become a human being. Don't pluck the bud. Where do we hear these things? I accidentally heard it. Whereas if it's a question of lungi dance, even in the classes and parties, everywhere you play it. They think it is off. These are all not to be publicly spoken about. I mean, that is the attitude of the thing. Yes, sir.
Sir, the powers of Lokayukta as proposed by Anna Hazare those days are yet to be implemented. And what is your views on that?
It will never be implemented, take it from me. First of all, I want you all to understand these ombudsman institutions are created to prevent a public servant from indulging himself in any manner opposed to law. Public servants are both politically elected people who are in office, as also the bureaucrats in the thing. It doesn't apply to ordinary citizens. So, if that is implemented, the persons who will be under scrutiny are only public servants. So they will never bring it. Jan Lokpal draft that was presented to the government, there were two jurisdictions given to them, copied from Karnataka Lokayukta Act. One is grievance redressal, the other one is anti-corruption jurisdiction. In the present Lokayukta Act, which is brought by the government, that grievance redressal is not there. Only anti-corruption is the thing. And without grievance redressal, many things were the decisions taken by the public servants. If a person is aggrieved, he has only to go to the court. There is no other ombudsman to respond to his problem. Whereas in Karnataka, that grievance redressal is there. As a matter of fact, from 2006 to 2011, when I was the Lokayukta, I got more than 26,000 complaints. We cleared all the complaints, about 60-65% of them got benefit to the thing and all. That they don't want. So they have not introduced that, they have introduced only Prevention of Corruption Act. Now, introducing Prevention of Corruption Act by itself to a Lokayukta is not the only problem and all. Because that institution will come in another way, like Anti-Corruption Bureau by the police and all. So some such organization will be there. But for the problems of the people, there is no organization and all. Therefore, I really do not think... and notice one thing, no political party opposed the Sarkari Lokpal bill. Everybody accepted. Because it suits everybody. So much so, believe it or not, in 2013 end, the Karnataka cabinet has passed a Karnataka Lokayukta Act of 2014, where they have taken the grievance redressal out from the statute. They want to copy the Central Lokpal bill. I want to give you a brief background of this Lokpal bill. In 1962, Pandit Nehru, as the Prime Minister, referred an issue to the Administrative Reforms Commission how to tackle maladministration and corruption. Then the Administrative Reforms Commission examined the problem and considered all the international ombudsman system and recommended an ombudsman which is similar to Scandinavian countries and named it Lokpal for the center and Lokayuktas for the state. In 1964, no bill was accepted. 9 times when the people questioned, they drafted Lokpal bill. It never came to the parliament. Like that, they went on dragging it because they didn't want an ombudsman of that type at all. So, ultimately, when Anna Hazare's movement started, lakhs and lakhs of middle-class people that supported it, they are the ones who are really angry with the corruption in this country. But very unfortunately, as most of the agitation ends, Anna Hazare's agitation also ended because a part of it became political. That was a great success of the government of the thing. So 2014 elections were coming, and in the mind of the people, there was always a doubt about the political parties. Why are they not bringing the Lokpal bill? So they answered that doubt by bringing a Lokpal bill, which has got absolutely no teeth. It is, according to me, a Pinjar poll. I know many of you may know what Pinjar poll is. Pinjar poll is a place in Gujarat where cows stop milking. They are sent there to be in the same. It's going to be a Pinjar poll for the bureaucrats and judges. Not one Lokpal, but 9 Lokpals are being appointed. Now Karnataka has copied that. It removed the grievance redressal, and for anti-corruption only is appointing 9 Lokayukts in the state of Karnataka. And ladies and gentlemen, under the Prevention of Corruption Act, nobody other than the police has any power to investigate. During my time also, it's my policemen who did it. If somebody has got credit, it is because of the policemen who were there then. They did the job and all. 9 Lokayukts here. None of the people in power, that is the governmental power, want this institution to be there.
I see your anguish very deep, and we are all a set of senior bureaucrats here, and we are all concerned citizens sitting here. You have any solution that each one of us in our own individual capacity we can do to change this slide in the moral values? We'll be very grateful to you. I'm sure each one of us will promise that whatever little solution pathway you show us, we will follow it, and then as bureaucrats they can spread it to there, and we as concerned citizens will spread it among our own colleagues, friends, students, teachers and others. I pray to you, give us some way forward, because we are going down and down. I think we have to stop this slide and move forward. We look forward to you for your suggestions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing I am of the opinion that corruption is not an evil which is born today, yesterday or day before yesterday. According to me, it was born with the birth of civilization itself. Maybe the creator himself wanted 2 things to be there, like many other contradicting things that are happening in this world. My understanding is the growth rate of corruption as also consequences, lack of moral values, is every day increasing, because there is every day the growth in lack of moral values is increasing in the thing. So the first thing to tackle is to change the mindset of the youngsters who are coming into the society and the future citizens of this country. That is the reason I chose these colleges and youth organizations to address. Maybe you can change 2%, 3% of them today. Maybe in the next decade it will become 20, 30, 40% and all. That would change, according to me, if you change the people. Like, take for example, I'm talking about 50s and 60s and all. 50s I was 10 years old, 60s I was 20 years old. I have seen in my society in which I live, if a person was sent to jail, nobody had any relationship with that person. He was not forgiven. He was not given the benefit of doubt why he went to jail, whether it is like Mahatma Gandhi going to jail or otherwise. He was treated as a person who has suffered imprisonment. That attitude, we can still bring it back into our thinking. If we are not going to condone corruption, if you are not going to condone the illegal things that happen because of lack of moral values, then at least in your household, the change will take place. Teach your children, the grandchildren, the rights and wrongs of life and all. It should be a huge campaign within the family first. Then insist upon the government to bring back the moral science and civics in their educational system, and give examples of good and bad, and convert their thinking, not purely making money. Do not encourage them to make money as quick as possible. I mean, it's a long drawn process. It can't be done in 10 years or 15 years. We have to suffer that because it took a long time. From 50s to 2015, every decade it started increasing. The zeros in it started increasing. And nobody bothered about it. Nobody speaks. But just take the anger, which is all hidden there. When Anna Hazare started a movement, I was with them for 18 months. We also committed a mistake. We concentrated only on Ramleela Maidans and Bandra Maidans and Freedom Park here, like that. We should have taken it outside to district levels, taluka levels, like Jayaprakash Narayan did. His movement went on for nearly 3-4 years. The Sampurna Kranti movement and all. We should have taken that. I realized it when I went to see the first day of fast by Anna Hazare in Mumbai. We went to Juhu Maidan beach. There was a Mahatma Gandhi statue. Annaji garlanded the statue. So we started walking to Bandra Maidan. Either side of the road, there were hundreds and hundreds of people were there. When we went to the Maidan, there were hardly about 50, 60 people there. Because there is a fatigue factor in us. But if you can change an individual, it's not that difficult. If one individual can change, you can change the family. And when a family changes, many things change around the family. So this is an effort. I don't know how far it is correct or otherwise, but I feel that's the only thing. Any amount of stricter law will not change it. Maybe if judicial system changes, and if a person who is accused of being corrupt is punished within, say, 6 months max, then the fear of conviction will be there. I'll give you another thing. There was a union minister called Sukram. He was raided by the CBI. In 1996, 3.5 crores of rupees was found inside his mattress. CBI filed the charge sheet in 1996 itself. A special CBI court convicted him in 2009. Who will be scared of punishment? Supposing I'm in a position where I could make money at my age, I wouldn't be bothered about punishment. Because it's going to come after 15 years. Well, I'm not going to be here. So we got to tackle that thing. Of course, one good thing is recently the Supreme Court has said in a judgment that a person holding a political office, if a charge sheet is filed against him in the prevention of corruption case, then within 1 year that case should be finished. If that is implemented, good enough. Maybe thereafter the Supreme Court will go one step further and say all people who are public servants.
What will it get implemented?
That's what.
This is, sir, there are few examples of systems that is taking care of, taking care of in the sense stopped to an extent corruption, which was affecting the public at large. One system that has happened was the railway, Tatkal tickets. There is a provision for Tatkal. Now, earlier people used to collect money for giving, reservations other than whoever has reserved. Now there is a provision, the Tatkal ticket. It's a provision and many people are utilizing it. And as I understand, there is a lot of reduction in corruption that way. Public is, everybody otherwise used to get the habit of corruption. It is the habit, that get generated at such occasions that make the people prone to giving, getting into the corruption. There is at another place, Tatkal passport. Passports are giving.
The same thing, railway ticket and passport.
Then in Andhra Pradesh, recently Chandrababu Naidu, he has created Seva Kendras, where they will not see who is, paying the fees. Whatever government certificates, other systems, whatever is required, it will come to your address. Only you will be giving the filled-in application form. Either it can be through the computer or it can be handed over at the Seva Kendra. The actual person who will be releasing those certificates is not seeing the person. So these are the places where public, every individual has to go. Issuing of ration card, issuing of such certificates for the children, various certificates, caste certificate, creed certificate. So from grassroots level, if the habit of corruption is at this level where 10 rupees, 20 rupees you are giving to people, it starts from there. If you can take out those things through a systematic way, then I think to a large extent we will be able to control. What do you say about it, sir?
Well, I am a pessimist, but if it is happening, I'll be very, very happy. But then you pointed out 2 areas in railways and passport office and Seva Kendra, maybe 3 areas you pointed out. Well, if it is successful now, I'm sure they'll find a way out tomorrow to overcome that also. I'm sorry, I'm a pessimist. No, witnesses must be there. What I'm saying is, a witness who is not seen by the accused will be a totally unfair trial because they can produce anybody as a witness because the accused is not seeing him. Yes, sir.
So, don't we need to look at this from a completely different viewpoint? I was just wondering, does it have something to do with the Indian people? When I say Indian people, is it something to do with the religion? We are so used to paying to see God. Just to get out of the line, I'm willing to pay the priest. To do something, to do some puja, I pay the priest. It is inborn in our religion, the way we treat the lower castes. We have no feeling for them, or we had no. It is improving now. You talked about moral science. I assume you went to a convent school, sir.
Yeah.
So moral science is not taught in the other schools. Was not in my time. It has to do with the concept of sin. It varies from religion to religion. Today it is no longer a sin.
That's exactly, that's my complaint. It is.
No, my religion. So it comes from there. It comes from the culture and the religion. It won't change by saying this is wrong or this is right.
I would have included the priests as one of the thing who could change the thinking. But then I have some knowledge about the priests, rather the religious heads.
The church has been little
Everywhere, church and even the temples and others, or even our Dharma gurus. I've heard of many people saying many things, and I believe they may be true also.
Yes. So that is our benchmark, sir. As a people,
No,
what the religion says to us is sin or evil or not is our benchmark. Our soul
naturally, because the fear factor comes from there.
Yes.
Fear factor comes because we follow a religion because of we don't know what will happen.
But there will be consequences. That's the only consequences that I am afraid of.
I agree with you.
Yes.
Thank you for your talk. I have two questions. First is, I believe one of the major root of corruption comes from political funding, because it actually circulates in the system. Once a political party or the person comes into the power, he starts favoring the corporate or any other sources where the fund has come, and the vicious cycle starts. So one of the ways, I mean, it's not the only or the the way which is a panacea for everything, but one of the ways is to probably check where the political funding comes from. And the second thing is, when you said that legitimate way of becoming wealthy, I think there is no legitimate way of becoming wealthy. Whenever you are becoming wealthy, you are probably snatching somebody else's, whether it is I would say that, probably, let me tell me from my experience, the two corporates I worked before coming to NIAS, in one of the corporates, they have taken up a project which does algorithm design for a French wine bottle manufacturing company. I did raise this as a value point of view. As a corporate, when I'm engaging my brain to write code, I would not write code for something which promotes, for example, alcoholism. In the second corporate, that time I was not successful, probably I was not senior enough. But on the second occasion, I was successful to prevent a project which was coming to efficient our BD manufacturing systems to prepare as much BDs as possible. Well, somehow that project could be stalled because I was the one who opposed that time. My point is, when we are becoming part of such a system which becomes profit driven, as an employee, as all the scores of the software engineers working today, day in, day out, putting their hard labor, but becoming a part of a system which is profit driven, which is not value driven. So they may be thinking they have a legitimate way of earning a lot of money, going out of the country and earning in dollars, that the conversion rate is making the magic. But I don't think, when our primary school teachers are paid so low, we have the right to, checking mails and get so much of heavily paid. I mean, there is something systematic failure. When a cricketer earns so much, when a Shah Rukh Khan, by acting in a film, earns crores of rupees, how do I say that is legitimate? I mean, that is my question.
Well, I can tell you one thing, I don't agree with your very basis that nobody can earn enough legitimately. I mean, I really don't. There are ways and means of earning it legitimately, and many of the rich people have earned it legitimately. At least from what I know of Bill Gates, I heard of Bill Gates, there is no such allegation against him. There are many people are there. In India, maybe the rich ones, we always have a doubt about how they acquired the wealth when you look at it from their wealth point of view and all. But I'm not going to the extent of saying there is no honest person in this country. No rich person is honest. I don't agree with that and all. But I'm saying that large section of the people are not honest. Earlier, honesty was the most important factor. There was more honest people than the dishonest people. The things are changing, and now that dishonest people have overtaken the honest people. Your experience, of course, could give you an impression that there's no way to make money honestly and all. I don't think I agree with that. Sorry? There have been discussions about this political funding and the election commission paying for the expenses, and then get it reimbursed from the political parties is one way of doing it and all. The election commission can also regulate the number of cars that have been used, number of volunteers that is being used, by giving identity cards for the cars and cards for the cars and volunteers, and even for petrol consumption they can give coupons and do that. But then again from the other source or their own sources, the candidates will be spending separately. It will not be easy to check it at all and all. And we take it so, there's nothing wrong with that. If I have to win the election, I got to spend the money. And today the voters are accepting the money. The statement of the leader from Delhi today that you take money from this political party, take money from that political party, but vote for me. That shows the lack of seriousness even towards such a very important issue of bribing the voters.
So one of the worries, I'm sorry, is that when there is somebody like the Aam Aadmi Party who's standing for the very thing that we're discussing, and he doesn't win, what does this show?
How many of the people in Aam Aadmi Party are honest?
No, but at least he claims to be honest. At least the other side, you know.
Sir, let me tell you one thing. I was pretty close to that political party because Mrs. Kejriwal and I worked with the Anna team for 18 months together. He tried to persuade me to get into the political party. There I said no. About a week back he was here. He met me also, but our talk was entirely a different thing. Okay, let's take that part of the 59-day tenure in Delhi. Very next day after swearing in, 2 members of the cabinet go in the midnight to get some ladies arrested on some serious charges. The policeman said, I'm not arresting and all. So they went on a dharna the next day on a silly thing that the action should be taken against the policemen. They sat in the Rajpath for dharna. And there was a police, section 144 declared there. Gathering of more than 4 people was prohibited under the act. And when Mr. Kejriwal was asked a question by the press wala, why are you doing this as a chief minister of the state? You can't do it, he said. He said, show me a provision in the constitution which says I can't do this. That press wala came and met me. He asked me the question, is it correct? I said, constitution doesn't say you should not commit murder, you should not commit rape, you should not commit many other crimes and all. But Criminal Procedure Code, section 144 says you can't gather more than 4 people in a place. That too Rajpath, where there's going to be a ceremonial parade in a couple of days only. You are breaking a law. As a chief minister, you don't have authority to break a law. And what did they do in 59 days? Nothing. And when somebody said, you are not doing the administrative work, he started getting the files to the street. We got to have some seriousness in administration. You got to have some discipline. You can't say that I'm not committing any this thing. I'm not corrupt.
Sir, there is a huge population which is not having access to sending their children to regular schools. People who are really homeless. How do we, reach them? Because unless you bring them also into this, and whereby they also are able to meet their aspirations in whatever way, I don't think even if just the middle class teaching their children will do it. I think the challenge is how to bring them into the fold also.
Madam, teaching the children is the responsibility of the government under the Constitution of India, up to the age of 14 at least. Providing basic amenities is again the responsibility of the state government under Article 21 of the Constitution of India. It has been held in so many words by the Supreme Court many times and all. It is the failure of governance which is causing this problem. I'll give you one example how this is a situation is created. In 2010, the CAG reported to the Government of India that out of the lakhs and lakhs of crores of rupees given to the various state governments to provide drinking water to every village, 56,000 crores is unaccounted for, is what is reported. Can you imagine a scheme of supplying drinking water to the poor people of this country, which is the responsibility of the governance, for which the funding is made by the central government? It's not fulfilled. The money is taken away from there. That is the governance we are having. Let Rajiv Gandhi, then the Prime Minister of India, said, out of every rupee the Government of India gives to the benefit of the poor, only 15 paise reaches the poor. When they fail, what they do is, they create laws asking the private sector, you alternate provide for it and all. What is RTE? Right to education. It's reserving certain percentage of seats in every educational institution for the have-nots, which they should have provided for. They are closing schools in Karnataka. Their own government schools are closing. This is what I'm trying to prove, bring before you. This is a failure of governance. You can't say, I don't have the money. Every minute of the parliament costs 3.5 lakhs of rupees. Every minute of the parliament. Nothing positive, constructive is done. Divert that money, if you don't have it, for the education. Divert that money for housing. Divert that money for basic provisions like supplying of drinking water, medicine. Who goes to the government hospital today? He who can't afford to borrow money, he alone goes there. This is the level of governance in this country.
Yes.
1 minute, please. Yes, sir.
I think a major part of the corruption is also due to foreign corporates. I worked in with foreign corporates for 3 decades. The last one I left was on account of this problem. They call it facilitating payment. We are supposed to give money to the government people under the category facilitating payment. I told them that both the giver and the taker are culprits. We call it bribery, not facilitating payment. Today, you find a lot of scientists being influenced by foreign corporates, particularly a company like Monsanto, for promoting their genetically modified crops, where we have not got much expertise, but what little good advice is given by a scientist is thrown to the winds. And the government minister takes it upon himself. Today I've written a letter to Deccan Herald, it's come in today's paper. You can read that.
Sure.
Actually, the person who encourages corruption is a politician. And unless we change our system of electoral policy, let's change the electoral system, this question of making money will continue because he has to spend lakhs of rupees to get elected. Having got elected, he has to make up for the lakhs of rupees he has spent 10 times more, 100 times more. So this is a main issue of corruption, and their children also get accustomed to this, and the whole society gets corrupted. I think people like you should come forward to do something about it.
I agree with you, sir, that foreign corporates are also responsible for corruption or the growth of corruption in this country. I mean, speaking on their behalf, I would say they may be doing it because they have to compete with the Indian corporates who are also corrupt and bribing the thing. So it's a question of competition. Therefore, we can say every corporate is, in that sense of the term, is corrupt and all. I'll give one example. I was invited by one of the topmost companies in India to speak to their officers on corruption and other values, you know. So after the talk, it was in near Pune in one of the resorts. I was sitting with some of the officers and were having lunch. Then I asked them, you manufacture automobile. You compete with the other manufacturers of automobile when you sell it to a government corporate, mostly the transport department and others. Don't you bribe those officers? Is it possible for you to sell your product to them without bribing, when somebody else is going to bribe and sell their product? He was hesitating to answer. He first stopped by saying, we don't bribe. I see. And KSRTC, that's the Karnataka Road Transport Corporation, buys your vehicles without bribing. No, sir, our agent bribes. I didn't ask them, do you undervalue and sell it to the agent or not? Anyway, the corporates are responsible for it because it's easy money and everybody is targeting them now.
We have time for just 2 more questions, one here and one there.
Sir, which one is the bigger evil? Corruption or not taking any decision at all on any file?
Both are the same. Both are the same. You take money and take a decision in favor of the person who has given the thing. And when you don't take decision, the government, the country suffers.
You see, now what happened with bureaucrats, they feel that even after retire, if I take a decision even in right spirit, someone may after some time may take it in a wrong view and I may be prosecuted. So that's why I don't want to take a decision.
But then they are protected under 197 of the Criminal Procedure Code. No government will give sanction to prosecute. Even in cases where we have caught red-handed, for years together the government has not given permission to prosecute. On the contrary, many of them have been promoted also, because it's an additional qualification.
And other dichotomy in our system, like I don't want my son to study in a government school. I don't want if there is any ailment go to the government hospital, but I want my son or daughter to get a government job. Why so?
You know the answer.
Is it easy?
It is like a parliamentarian legally getting 2 salaries for the job he does. He gets a monthly salary, he gets his pension, that's together as a salary. Then he gets a sitting fees for going and sitting there. I didn't get a sitting fees when I was working as a Supreme Court judge. I got 1 salary only. Like that, the government, he gets a full salary every month. That is nothing, that's only bakshis. Then you get the other one which is much bigger. Yes, sir.
If question.
So the sitting Chief Justice of India a few years back admitted on record that about 20% of the judiciary is corrupt. So in view of that, is there a need for a judicial ombudsman separate?
Certainly, certainly. As a matter of fact, opposing the new bill wherein they want to appoint a commission for the appointment of judges, I publicly stated that this is nothing but trying to take the courts under their control and the executive keeping the power of appointment of Superior Court judges. I said, there have been mistakes on the part of the collegium, nobody can say no, but these are human errors, not systemic errors. System is fine. 5 judges sit together and take a decision who should be appointed as a Superior Court judge. Now, they are expected to be honest in their decision. They are expected to be honest in the judgment they write. Such are the people who are already judges. Now, maybe there are human errors, but that human error is going to be there in this commission also. Because they are also human beings here. One other difference is the performance and the capacity to become a judge is observed by the sitting judges much more, because day in and day out that candidate will be appearing in that court. Whereas 3 persons in this collegium will not be watching this performance. The 2 honorable men and 1 law minister. Law minister may be a law graduate. He might not have practiced. Or even those who practiced have left it long time back. The present lot who is to be elevated, they can't be in this. But 2 things are necessary in the collegium system. Mandatorily, it should be made transparent. The persons whom they are considering for the appointment of a High Court judge or a Supreme Court judge, his name should be there in a website or in the notice board, wherever it is more convenient. And the second thing is, and any complaint is received should be considered by an independent commission, not the collegium. And their views should be taken before appointing. That's one thing. Second thing is, once you are appointed as a judge of the Superior Court, you feel that nobody can touch you. Appoint an independent commission not consisting of judges, outsiders, who then can entertain complaints and come to a conclusion and refer the conclusion to the President, and President will act on that, and the only action should be removal. But that fear that somebody is watching me there should be there.
Before I request Air Commodore Vikram Singh to give us his vote of thanks, may I, on behalf of the Director, Faculty and Staff of NIAS, present you with a small moment.
I hope it's not bribe.
on behalf of all the participants and the audience here, it is my privilege, sir, this evening to thank you for a very thought-provoking and a very insightful talk to us. And you talked to us about that affects all of us at a very, very basic level. And I think every human being in this country really suffers on a daily basis because of this malady. And I think it is your experience and your being a human that has shown us what can be done, what is happening, and what we must do in the future if we need to change this country. So thank you very much once again, sir.